Good afternoon well, as of now, everybody. It's been a few seconds into noon, so good afternoon. My name is Matt Kravitz. I'm super happy to host you guys for our last session of the day, AI apps and agents in action. A little bit about myself. I'm a senior software engineer here at Concurrency. I've been here for almost 5 years now. On the day-to-day, I'm just an individual contributor and one of the tech leads on our projects. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I checked that QR, so I expect at least one or three of you guys to connect with me throughout here today. And then a little bit fun fact about me, I'm actually in Europe. I had some pre-planned travel, and Monday night I flew out to Poland. So I'm in Poland hanging out, and I'm super glad to be with you guys. And with that, I'll hand it off to Anne from Microsoft, who's one of our guests here today.
Hey everyone, Ann Britt. I'm super happy to be here. I'm a senior digital solutions engineer at Microsoft, specializing in AI workforce. So, really in low code solutions, agentic capabilities, and copilots. And through that, I really drive innovation and focus on digital transformation for our customers. So, I'm really happy to be here to support this conversation and talk to you all about this awesome topic.
Yep. Thank you, Anne. I hope you guys can see my little laser pointer. Can you? I don't know, Anne, if you see my little laser pointer flying around.
Yes.
Awesome. So for today's agenda, we just went through the intro, so we could check that off. We have a bit of a shameless plug here coming right up. Then we're going to get into a bit of an overview of Copilot Studio. Some of the audience may or may not be familiar with how it works, what it is. We're going to talk through some use cases, some of the challenges that come around with Copilot Studio and Azure AI Foundry, and just in general that entire stack, both organizational that I've seen, but also my own. We'll get to talk a little bit about that. We're actually going to spend most of the time here and just building, and we'll get to what we're going to be building next. We're going to have another shameless plug, and then just talk. So I hope to have us engaged, have some conversations. I know it's now the last one, but I want to make sure that we make the best of it. So with that shameless plug, we do offer a free complimentary that seems doubled up, but we offer a complimentary session to talk all things AI apps, ideation, anything like that. So feel free to go and chat, and if you're interested in it, our team will be happy to hang out and talk to you about it. With that said, really quickly, what is Copilot Studio? It is Microsoft's tool for building custom AI copilots. Well, what is Copilot? Copilots are effectively assistants that are fully employed with artificial intelligence, and they're able to take conversational instructions to then integrate and work with apps, websites, teams, and more. And when I first started using it, the whole conversational aspect of it really kind of was hard to grasp and it blew my mind a little bit. But the more you work with it, the more comfortable you are. Really, you get to integrate AI within your business, and the plethora of connectors and now MCP servers that are available make that super easy, super seamless. And in general, one of the focuses of this talk is really automating workflows, making it such that AI is within grasp of your organization's tool belt. That said, though, there's also the things you have to be careful about. With the advent of AI, everybody has a hammer and everything is a nail. So you have to also be cognizant of where to employ it. So that's a little bit of something that we're going to talk about a little bit. Now, within Copilot Studio, there's a studio. And what is that, right? It's basically a UI that's going to help us design and manage the environments that we have our agents in. It's very akin to Power Platform. As a matter of fact, it's augmented inside of Power Platform. The same elements of environments that you have in Power Platform, pipelines, managed environments, unmanaged environment, all of that applies with Copilot Studio. And building your agents in a low-code fashion within Copilot Studio is just as seamless as it is to build a Canvas app and certain things like that. So a lot of the authoring, the integrations, the managing, super easy to come to terms with and super easy to get a grasp on. So I saw this image at Build. I went to Build. I had the great pleasure of going to Build this past year, and I saw it, and I thought I would talk about it a little bit. We're here in this leftmost box, and we're going to stay within this box for the most part, but we're going to give honorary mentions to others throughout this presentation. Now, the reason why we're here and we're going to stay here is because I only have 15 minutes, really 30 between the demo, and I could talk about this for hours on end, and I also could problem solve and go through my things as we integrate Copilot Studio. We create an agent in Copilot Studio. We might create an Azure AI Foundry with an agent inside of that project using GPT-4o or something like that. We're not going to get into all of that. We're really going to focus on Copilot Studio. Just know that throughout our use cases and the more enterprise designed implementations, really, you might have all or elements of these. Oftentimes, you really have at least one or two, right? I mean, actually, you might have all four of these, right? Where if you're using Copilot Studio to surface your Teams agent and give some instructions there, well, then on top of that, you're using likely an Azure function to add some more pro code, more custom, more lower level kind of work. And obviously you're using Visual Studio for that. You're using the Foundry SDK, and you're surfacing that all through an agent in Azure AI Foundry. So this stack, I didn't realize at the time when I was sitting there at Build, hugely impactful and hugely relevant today. And we are literally living this image. If you are building AI apps and making anything within that sort, and doing it in Microsoft's tech space, you're more than likely living this stack. And did you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say, Mac, that, I know you're going to get into some of this later, but when you look at the platform story, which is what you're telling here, there's real cohesion in your builds and in your security, your data structure. So yeah, I would just say great with the nod to this. It's super relevant and timely. So excited you how you tease this out.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about some of the real use cases you might see. The first one being is the most common, just because all business needs to make money. And in order to make money, for the most part, all business needs to have sales. And part of the sales process is going back and forth and quoting and negotiating. Well, with the advent of AI, the automation of a sales quote process and in general CPQ has been made hugely streamlined and within grasp. Where previously we would work with clients that would have to curate their data for years sometimes years even, to build enough data to train custom models and use machine learning to build. Now, with AI being effectively somewhat of a commodity, it is within grasp to accelerate the sales process of your business using sales quote automation. And just to let you know, our demo is going to be about that. So really big focus here. Some of the things that we've done and I've seen is field technician support. So imagine if your company has a ton of field technicians and they need to reference documentation or schematics or diagrams, and they don't want to carry a huge textbook with them when they're servicing some sort of equipment, for example, an AC unit or whatever. We've built things that accelerated agents in the field using AI that's trained on documentation, manufacturing, IT and operations, where you're using something akin to the site reliability engineer, which is an AI augmented into the Azure portal that allows you to monitor what Azure performance is going like and what errors you have, and even employ fixes right away within seconds. Logistics. right? With logistics is fast paced, and the more AI you can. I have a father, and he's an owner operator, so logistics is pretty close to my heart, and so I know how I can always think about what the real life use cases are, but even sales quoting where the dispatcher goes to the broker and you're starting to negotiate, all relevant. Finance. We've actually worked with a few companies where we've reconciled accounts payables using AI and accelerated those processes. There's a ton of different use cases there, and retail and e-commerce, right? I'm sure you're seeing it today. I mean, if you even just the fact that you're saying something now when your phone is nearby and you're talking about a new phone case and all of a sudden your Amazon store has phone case suggestions, that's one of those examples. So those real life use cases all applicable. And did you have any other thoughts, comments, or anything that you wanted to add to this slide?
Yeah, I love that you hit so many different industries. We have case studies in so many of these. So, for example, manufacturing, it's a great one. We've seen a 40% reduction in incident response time through autonomous monitoring on manufacturing lines. It's pretty crazy what we're seeing. And when sales is another really good one. Internally at Microsoft, we did a study when Copilot was released to our sales groups, and we see that our sales reps are recouping on average about 90 minutes a week. And at scale, you can imagine, what that looks like in terms of ROI and just efficiencies that are gleaned. So, great examples that you pulled out. Maybe I'll give one more. You mentioned financial services, and this one sticks out to me. 60% faster loan processing time via intelligent document processing. I don't know about all of you, but for me, dealing with a bank in any way, shape, or form is tedious. So if you could reduce the time, I'm excited about that.
I'm living it right now. I'm currently waiting for my house to be built, and I just went through the mortgage process. And I could tell you that I know my parents went through this, and when they bought their house, and it is much quicker now. So I hope that this company is also using AI. So certainly applicable. I did hear of AI being used in manufacturing to your point, in fault detection or predicting faults. So for example, if a company is using drills, they'll use AI coupled with IoT to determine that a drill is going to go bad. And so a lot of that, and then what that allows you to do is to never have downtime because you're going to preemptively replace those drills. And a lot of this stuff is hugely impactful to the bottom line. So absolutely. So yes, I did give the sneak preview. We're going to focus on sales code automation. So I just wanted to let you guys know what we will build. A lot of my presentations are all F1 themed. I'm a huge fan of Formula One. So what we're going to build is a Formula One sales quoting tool, and we're going to use Copilot Studio to detect new quotes, find the requisite product, and we'll talk through that. We'll assemble a quote in some human readable format. And before that, within the product section, we're going to determine what the pricing is, what the on-hand inventory that is available, and we're going to send the quote to a client. And I have, that you can see, I have quite a few of asterisks there. And part of this, and we'll get to that in a greater fashion here in a second, kind of speaks to what Todd, and I don't know how many of you guys were at the keynote, kind of speaks to what Todd was talking about and the confidence rating and some trust. One of the things that we can do in Copilot is send emails directly. We can create drafts. We can reply directly. So we'll talk to those capabilities. Now, the reason why this is asterisked is because I've worked with companies where sending a quote directly from AI, at least at the beginning, is not something that they are willing to risk. It is business, it is sales, it is money. Especially as the adoption rate grows, you want to make sure that you have that human in the loop, right? Todd did mention that human in the loop. So the reason why there's an asterisk here is that we're going to be sending that email for quote just for demo purposes. That said, though, I would not recommend doing that straight away. That's something that you probably get to after you've built enough confidence and you've got enough test data to prove that you have, 90 some accuracy or whatever threshold a company may feel comfortable with. But I did want to throw that out that you do want to be cognizant of those things so as to not erode trust. And with that said, organizational challenges. I have the first one, what I think is one of the most prevalent ones and ones that are Because I'm on the implementation team, on the delivery team, most often this is the one I run into first, is data readiness and quality. A lot of companies want to get into AI, and we've done this where we'll have some like low cost kind of dip your feet in the water solution, just to prove out the use cases work for company X or company Y. That said, though, the ultimate benefit is somewhat stunted, or at least there is a law of diminishing returns that applies when your data is not curated and not clean enough for AI to operate on. We'll get to that in the demo where where we're going to show our data source for this information. Well, if every database and every company used data that was that clean and that simple to understand, AI would have a much easier job. But that's not the real world. So that is one of my chief challenges. Legal compliance and governance. Anne, we're just talking about this. Maybe Anne, I'll let you speak to that a little bit, since you're familiar with that a lot more probably than I am.
Yeah, I think, this is a topic that everyone wants to double down on. You hit I think, number one part of the concern is data, right? We're concerned about our data being leaked, whether it's, things that are under NDA or just very, a PHI or PII. There's critical data that can be stored in some repositories. And so with the advent of agentic capabilities, our LLMs sitting over these things, and, just all that can be exposed, it becomes a bigger concern. But, Mac, you touched on this. What it really comes down to is being smart about our overall security posture. And Satya said it best when he said, without security and our zero trust architecture, the rest of it doesn't really even matter. We could be the most innovative AI company on the planet, and we are. But without having that security posture, without having proper data protection and governance, without properly looking for technology and tools that are going to help you, like Purview or DLP, it really can become a little bit of a nightmare situation. Luckily, we do have all of the tools to bring to the table to help with that. And really, there is then that business process behind that of making sure you clean up your data. In two ways, that's important, right? If you're moving towards an agentic world, you're right. You want to have that really clean data. But also, agents learn differently, and the way that data is searched is different, and it's in vectors. And so the data needs to be clean everywhere, or you're really getting half the story. It's like playing a game of telephone and the message getting kind of like watered down as you go along, if you can imagine that. So, and the same then is true for the security of that data if we don't have things properly classified or shared. So, I hope that perspective helps, Mac, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And with the legal and compliance aspect of it, I wanted to make sure I give you a chance to talk, just because, again, we were talking about this. I've had clients, implementations were slowed and put to a stop because the legal department just wanted to make sure that they do their due diligence, and rightfully so, to make sure that their business is secure and the data is there too. But it is definitely one of the challenges. I wanted to draw attention to that. That is why, and if I actually go back to to one of the slides here that showed the stack, this is why you're seeing this box around Azure AI Foundry, and specifically the security and governance. Azure AI Foundry is at top of mind, is that security aspect, and making sure that you can take all these aspects within this stack and still leverage the things available to you in Azure, to ultimately secure it better. So I just wanted to mention that. Trust. Trust is a big one. That's why you don't send quotes right away. That's why you might want to check them. That's why you kind of set thresholds within your organization to ensure that the AI is doing what it's supposed to. And that is exactly why there are certain specific automated tests that you can run against your Azure AI Foundry agents, that you can code. And, if you create an agent in Python, and part of it is deploying that to Azure AI Foundry within ADO and within certain specific implementations, you can test a previous deployment against a new deployment to ensure that the answers are what you expect them to be, both from a safety perspective in terms of making sure that the AI isn't doing something nefarious, but also from just the output in general. Culture is another big organizational challenge where, first of all, and you don't see this in consulting companies, but you definitely see this in some industries where things just don't need to change, or at least that's the perception of some of the members. Some of the members feel threatened, so that's a challenge. And a perceived cost and scalability. So AI is such a huge topic, and a lot of conversations around is like, oh, it's expensive and a lot of money and tokens cost, and to some of that, to some of the degree, it's true. However, you with the features that are rolling out within Azure AI Foundry, for example, that chooses the best model for the best price that can solve the problem at hand. Which that surfaced in build, or more recently, what I've seen in Copilot Studio that's still in preview, is the efficiency capabilities, which we'll get to, which again chooses the best model within the Copilot Studio stack to ensure that the questions answered are cheap. That's one of the considerations, and then the other one is really just start small. Don't go big. The projects I've worked on that have led to most success within the AI space always started with a very small proof of concept, within a given use case for the business that solved the problem in a very simple way. But really, it started to show that, hey, this is possible, and gain confidence. So all of these challenges exist. All of these challenges, all the companies that we're talking about or seeing or hearing, they're all going through them. All of them are solvable. So that's definitely a big one. Personal challenges. We're about to get into the demo here. Hang on. Personal challenges for me is really at the beginning when I started it. I've been coding for a while now. I've always been pro code, front end, back end, data, everything. The whole conversation of low code versus pro code is wrong. This versus should not be versus. This is low code with and pro code. With the advent of Copilot Studio and how it's growing and how agentic apps and agentic development goes in, this is no longer a versus. This is totally with. You should get used to it as developers, and you should get used to it as architects. And the sooner you do, the better off any product that you're working with will be, because it is here to stay. And really, it is when those two things work together, the solution is overarchingly tons better. I'm seeing this. I'm literally working with a client today where we're building something that has elements of low code and elements of pro code, and that is becoming more and more prevalent. So I will definitely say that that's been a personal challenge for me to realize this is not a versus. This is a with. Certain preview features are not yet ready for like the enterprise level stuff that I would like to see be more available. Just for example, some of the testing capabilities, certain features that are fundamental are still in preview. So, for example, deploying with pipelines, some of the deployments within pipelines, using pipelines of Copilot Studio agents from one environment to the next, still aren't functioning to the absolute way that you'd like. Well, it's because it's in preview, and we're still using it, and it's still great, but it's still being worked on. One of the things that isn't fully yet ready, I think, was I recently tried to use managed identity authentication within an agent flow, and I started running into issues, and I started researching, and I found out that there is no documentation, and MVP is like, well, just use this. And so we're all working on this. We're all in this together. We're all like figuring it out. And the more we do that, the better it's going to get. But it is something that I've had some challenges with, but nothing that you can't get over. We're engineers to solve problems, so that's our job. That's why we're here. And then just fundamental changes in approach. I'll tell you this: one of the things that pained me the most is understanding that now not everything is going to be exactly the way I coded it. Where if I'm writing a method that's doing a certain thing, that method is going to do the same exact thing every time unless I make a change to it and tell it to do something else. And my tests are all going to succeed in the same way every time. Getting over that mental hurdle that, hey, I'm a developer and not everything is going to be, kind of the way that I would always want. That's a big change. For example, the responses may vary just a tad between one another, and we'll see that. And AI is going to take some liberties, and you might have to refine it. And there's this whole prompt engineering thing, which, again, when I first heard prompt engineering, I thought it was this fancy thing. And then I was like, oh my God, I can never do this. And then I realized, okay, it's just a fancy word for being very specific with your instructions, and just understanding how all that works. So those were my personal challenges. Those are the things that I ran into. Any comments, Anne?
Yeah, for sure. I think, it's interesting. So I come from the customer side. I've been with Microsoft for almost 2 years now. And I used to get immensely frustrated, and I still do, even internally, on the availability of some of the feature set, what's in preview, or maybe why things are taking longer. But I mentioned before, right, that security is first. So a lot of what you're seeing now in some of these, I would say, delays in release to core product are really because we're hardening our posture as we're learning and as we're growing in this space. The other thing I'll say is, and Mac, I'm sure you've seen this too, in my career, I have never seen a technology move this fast ever before. So I say that to say one of my personal challenges is learning, right? The speed with which this changes, the integrations that are available, the APIs that exist that never existed before. We're learning about whole new protocols and ways to share and orchestrate these agents. So I think the learning is maybe something else that I would add, but that also excites me because it means we certainly won't be bored for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is exciting. I mean, the fact that we even get to play with these things in preview is awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that has come in really handy, and you mentioned learning, so I just thought of it, is I actually had an agent that I built that was connected to the Microsoft Learn MCP server, which is free to use. And that makes that a lot easier because that MCP server is obviously going to give you the latest information, and it's all the embeddings are built on the data that's in there most recently. And so, with that said, to anybody here, if you're dabbling with Copilot Studio, maybe the first one might be to build yourself just a very quick agent that's answering questions related to Microsoft documentation that uses the MCP server. That way, you don't have to search through tons and tons of articles. It's super helpful. But yeah, we're in this together. We're learning. We're doing. So definitely recommend that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Mac. Build yourself agents, right? Don't wait for a big enterprise agent. You could automate your whole entire day. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, I have coworkers that have built agents that are scheduled to pull the latest information from certain popular blogs to make sure that they have the latest learnings. Use this in your day to day. Like this is just a more personal, since we were talking about use cases, personal use case for developers, not necessarily enterprise grade stuff, but totally helpful to our day to day. But with that said, let's build. So we're gonna go ahead and jump in. Um, let me change my screen here. I apologize. I am down to one monitor now that I'm across the pond. So I'm not nowhere near as professional of a setting as I would normally have. So bear with me here, friends. But where we are is copilotstudio.microsoft.com, which if you navigate to that on your own tenant, you'll probably land in the default environment for your company. As I was mentioning, right, what we're going to be building is an F1 sales automation agent. Really, where we start is we go straight into agents, and let's just build along. We'll talk through it. If you guys have any thoughts or anything that you'd like to add, just throw that in the chat, or any questions that you have. Feel free to just fire away or hold them to the discussion, and that's okay too. But we're just going to go ahead and start with our new agent. Um, if you've never seen Copilot Studio before, there's two ways that you can create an agent. One is where you actually use conversational language to configure your language, and you could tell it to do, hey, I'd like my agent to do X and do Y, or you can configure it straight away. I'm a little bit more stringent, so I prefer to configure on my own. So we're gonna call this the F1 sales agent. And this agent is going to assist us with creating quotes for F1 team parts. Now, I have some instructions prepared for us that I think will work best for us. And so we'll go through them here briefly, and then we'll throw them on into our screens. So here, just one second. You are an agent, and we'll go through this. One of the things that I know will improve with due time is the ability to expand. Oh, this was not here. I swear to you, this was not here like 3 weeks ago. So
Speed of light. That's what I'm saying, Mac. It's like it's crazy.
yeah. So I'm glad that I can expand the chat or the input box, because that was previously not available, and that was something that I had a problem with. But anyways, you are an agent designed to interpret emails. When an email comes in, you should do the following, right? So our agent, the way the workflow is going to work is the workflow of actually many companies. So some of the companies I've worked with told me that a lot of their business comes in through email, and so and as a matter of fact, a lot of their business, the first person to respond gets the business, which is huge. Because if I build an agent that's going to respond to you within, say, 20 or 30 seconds, which this is the kind of accelerated response times we've seen for our clients, then you're going to win the business. And that's monumental for making sure that the sales process goes smoothly and that the ROI is there. Because typically a sales representative for a lot of companies in the best case scenario takes 15 minutes to get a quote. But if you're on PTO or if you're on lunch or whatever, it might be an hour or two. And by that time, somebody else will respond. Well, if your agent can respond to you within 30 seconds, that's a lot better than even 30 minutes. So we're going to go through the emails, and we're going to scan my email box, and we'll see how that goes. So when an email comes in, you should do the following. Determine if the email subject and body hint that the email is about a request for a quote in Formula One parts. If it is, send an email with the quote information, including a list of all the quoted parts, using the send an email tool, which we will build. If not, do nothing. And the fact that I can write this 2 sentences, again, to my developer mind, like it blows my mind, because when I wrote it and it did it, it was just completely mind-boggling. The next one is use the knowledge from a SharePoint folder, F1 parts, to determine what the cost of a given part is. If a part is not on the list or the on-hand is 0, please let the customer know that the part is not available. We'll see that. We'll add that knowledge base. We'll add that directory. This is an example. I actually put this instruction here on purpose to get us thinking about the integration, right? So if we're thinking about the way that we commonly do things right now, a lot of APIs flying around and not everybody's using MCP servers yet. Well, JSON, if payloads are flying around the world all the time, everywhere, a ton of it, you can have your agent spit out the results. And I've done this before for companies, and if you integrate it in this way, you can have it spit out specific JSON schema, which is hugely important, given that you can basically integrate with just about anything, because you can create a topic or create a tool which uses an agent flow that then calls an API, and you can send that API request provided this payload, and oh, by the way, the agent will know to provide that payload automatically, and just do it. So that's the third instruction. And then the fourth one, when invoking the send in email tool, the to should be the from of the trigger email. So that'll make a lot more sense when we get through. We're not going to be using the reply. We're not going to be using the draft. We're just going to send a new email to the person. So those are the instructions that I want to give it. And these are very specific. And as you build agents, this is a lot of these instructions, whether you're working on them within the configuration of your tool, and we'll get to what the tool is, or within the configuration of your agent, very prevalent for you to get there. So the next thing that we're going to do is use knowledge. I actually have a document prepared, and I'll show the team here. Very simple CSV file. I kept it pretty simple just to save us some time. A very simple CSV file that shows part numbers, the manufacturer, whether it's Sauber or Ferrari, what the part is, and I mean, a front wing, there's a ton of parts that goes into it. So again, we're keeping it simple. A clutch is not just a clutch; it happens to be thousands of other little subcomponents. And then the units of measure, some of them are a little bit off, but that's okay. The price per part, which they're really lowballing Formula One here, trust me. And then the on-hand available. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek at the data. And so what we're going to do, and let me share my screen here, is we're actually going to add, and so that file already exists. I have it uploaded in SharePoint, and you can add knowledge and choose to add knowledge from Dataverse, from D365. Those are the typical Microsoft ones, but there's a ton of other ones that you'll see once I create this agent. And you can obviously add a knowledge from public websites. What does doing this do? This lets the agent, when it attempts to answer questions or attempts to interact with the user, they will go ahead and use whatever sources you specify here to be to provide the answer. So in our case, we're going to use SharePoint, and I'm going to navigate to a SharePoint site that we have, along with a directory. So one second here, and I have a F1 parts list here available, and I'm going to go ahead and add that. And I'm going to say you really want to be intentional, and you want to make sure that, so descriptions back when I was developing kind of were like optional. Well, not back when, I'm still doing that, but they were optional. Well, now they're really not. You really have to be very intentional with what you say. And so this document holds all the parts that are available to be sold when a customer requests a quote. So that's the description, and that's the context that the agent's going to have for this file. And so the next thing that we're going to do, we're actually not going to do any suggested prompts for now, is we're actually going to create. This is doing a lot of the stuff for you and taking care of things. The next thing that we're going to work on is actually triggers. So you can there's a few ways that you can surface an agent, right? There's actually purely and entirely automated, kind of like an automated flow in Power Automate or a Logic app. But there's also channels. So if you really wanted to expose your agent to the outside world and to users, these are all the channels that are available. And believe me, this used to not be this expansive list before. So it's moving. And one of the most common ones that we're doing today for clients oftentimes is Teams and 365 Copilot. Everybody wants an agent in Teams. So this is very common, but you can put it just about anywhere else that you'd like. So with that said, we're actually not going to surface this to anybody, just because we're going to keep it internal. The one thing I wanted to show you guys is, now that this agent is created, there is some knowledge, other knowledge sources that you can use, like Azure SQL, ServiceNow, Salesforce. So we're really going beyond just the typical Microsoft, Dynamics ERP kind of, with Dataverse and anything like that. We're expanding, and our wings are opening. So there's a lot more. We're bringing everybody in. And that was one of the key things that Satya mentioned during build, is that Microsoft aims to be the everything for everybody, within opening and adding more and more things to their catalog.
Yeah, Mac, I would just say one point to add to that, just to maybe punctuate a little bit, is really what that allows you to do is maximize on ROI for tools you already have. Right? It's truly going to allow for our customers to maximize on their investments.
Yep. Perfect. Sorry, I think I had a lapse in connectivity, and I thought it was you. But
no, yeah, I think, Ann, I think you for momentarily we couldn't hear you. You just want to kind of repeat what you said, Ann.
Yeah, essentially, that those integrations are allowing our customers to maximize on their current investments.
Yes, absolutely. Being able to connect and integrate with more things is, if you're being siloed to use Azure SQL, just Azure SQL and nothing else, or just D365 sales and nothing else, then you're less likely to use this. So the fact that we can use this for everything and everyone, and the toolbox is expanding, it's the more better. So one of the things that I just want to talk about really quickly is you're seeing several cards here. We're seeing tools, triggers, agents, topics, and suggested prompts. What is a tool? A tool is effectively an integration piece. So you can add various tools. You could add flows that are built in Power Automate. You can add MCP servers that are mainly available, whether it's Salesforce or whatever else, and we'll look at that. You could use agent flows, which are flows that you can create specifically in Copilot Studio. A plethora of different things you can call APIs directly through those automated flows. Triggers are the extensibility points to making this happen, believe it or not, on a trigger. So send or received an email, or new opportunity created, or new record. Again, various triggers. We'll take a look at that. Agents. So I'm sure if you've attended other sessions, there was this talk of multi-agents, right? And everybody hears multi-agents, and it's like, okay, well, great. Really, if you think about it, what this is kind of a change where an agent almost becomes a method or a function in code, where that function, if written correctly, is single purpose, and the perfect architecture is always made available and reusable, and it's very modular and kind of like a Lego block. Well, this is the agentic answer to that. And now you can have agents that, for all intents and purposes, serve a single function and are a single function that is then called by different agents. And using, in this case, low code, you can actually leverage AI orchestration, which lets the agent decide based on the context of the question and based on the instructions that we provide, lets the agent decide what other agent to call upon. So that is a low code approach to doing that. The more pro code approach that sometimes is employed for a little bit more granular or more specific implementations is the use of orchestration within semantic kernel, which allows you, actually now it's being integrated with Agent 1. You can use more specific orchestration, sequential orchestration, and such, which arguably for more enterprise implementations of a sales process, a sequential orchestration within semantic kernel may be the more appropriate approach. But for the intents and purposes of a demo, we're going this way. So that's just to touch on the fact that really agents can now become functions rather than entire implementations in and of themselves. So think about it that way when you approach multi-agents. And then there's topics. So if your agent is surfaced to a channel, be it Teams or Slack or whatever, you can add topics that are very procedural and very step-by-step, and you can maintain those because every agent gets their own set of default topics. I oftentimes, believe it or not, find myself for my use cases to be disabling some of these basic ones, or some of these system ones, because that's just noise that not necessarily everybody wants. And so if my agents are very specific to solve a very specific business problem, I'll disable some of the default ones, or delete them altogether, and then enable the ones I'm interested in, which have that more rigid approach. And then suggested a prompt. So if you've ever worked with, ChatGPT, now Copilot has it, where if you start writing, there's like little blurbs that pop up above your input box to kind of get what you're thinking. If you wanted to provide that for the end user, this is where you do that. This is where you add those suggested prompts. So with that said, we're going to move along a little quicker because I want to make sure that we have enough time. And there's a time check. We have, oh my goodness, we don't have enough time. We're going to build this quickly. So for our tools, we're going to actually go ahead and really quickly add a tool. And our tool is going to be an Outlook 365 connector. This is very similar to Azure Functions, and it's going to be send an email. And so this tool, we're going to get to configure it. And we're going to create it as my connection. So you can use other types of connections, but in this case, we're going to use my connection. It's going to be acting on behalf of me, Mac, at concurrency.com. And we're going to go ahead and configure that really quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and dig into my tool. I apologize. I do have a bit of a thing prepared just to make sure that we can move along faster. But, and this is, again, where descriptions, and this was the gripe. I know, Anne. This one doesn't expand yet. That's the one I wanted to expand. So
I'll call a guy, Mac.
Thanks. Actually, for all intents and purposes, I'm going to skip to one. I learned from the build presenters. I have the tool we were building already built. So we're going to go through that just to save time. I know that I want to just get through it and hopefully save a little bit of time for questions. And we're going to talk through the tools that we have available and the triggers. So I've just selected in this agent pane the agent that I've built alongside to kind of mimic this approach. 1 second. It's thinking. Let me hard refresh here just to make sure that maybe now I'm having technical difficulties from the internet perspective. And I sure was. Nothing that a hard refresh, Control R or Command R can't fix. So we're going to go ahead and enter the Mac test bot. And the Mac test bot, for all intents and purposes, is exactly what we were building here today. So the knowledge that we chose was the exact same file. It's the CSV file that we had there. The instructions for the agent are the exact same, and we'll talk a little bit about the tool. So we can configure a tool, which I called send an email. And the instructions I gave it, again, very specific. When drafting emails in Outlook, align neatly and make it easy to read. Keep a professional tone. For all formatting, use HTML. This is important. If you're surfacing it in Teams, if you're surfacing it in emails, it might be different. In Teams, I literally just write, make it nice and readable using markup. And then if you do that, it'll make it nice and readable using markup for Teams. But for all intents and purposes in emails, we wanted it in the HTML. We wanted it to be nice and clean. For quoted items, created a table displaying all the details. And it's going to do that using HTML. At the end, for the request for the quote. The company that are generating the emails is Concurrency. If there are more than one quantity of an item, include a total column for a given row. That's to make it specific that each row has might have more than one quantity. At the end of the email, state the total sum of dollar amounts. So very specific. And the inputs of this tool are the subject, and the body. And notice I told the agent that the to for this tool is the from of the trigger. And I chose dynamically fill with AI. And when you do that, the agent will know on its own what the input is. And that's crazy to me that it just does that. So that's the actual implementation of sending an email. And again, much easier than anything that I've ever had to do. And, you no longer have to use graph or anything like that. And then the trigger, right? So the trigger is actually just in Power Automate. So our trigger is a very conventional trigger. I did add some tidbits to it just from a safety perspective, and you guys will see that here in a second. And that is when a new email comes in to my inbox, that's the trigger. And then for each to recipient, I actually check to make sure that the sender isn't also the recipient. And that's because when I was testing this, I was testing it for my concurrency email, sending it to my concurrency email, and then I was in just a recursive hell. So I added that there to make sure that we're good. And then what we're going to do if it's not and everything is hunky-dory, we're going to send the prompt to the specified Copilot for processing. And that specified Copilot is obviously our bot. And I've already disabled all these other topics, which I didn't really need to do because we're not surfacing this anywhere. I did not add an agent. This is a very single purpose demo kind of agent. So what I'm going to do is actually show you guys a few of the examples that we have. So here, give me just 1 second. I have created just a garbage email, and it's primarily because I'm going to be sending myself an email and I don't. Here you are. So I have a Proton email. I'm checking it out. I'm going to send it to my concurrency.com email. And I'm going to title it RFQ, request for quote. And I'll say I need 1 Alpine intake, 1 Red Bull MGUH, and 1 Mercedes wheel rim. And I'm going to go ahead and send this email to myself. And the one thing I wanted to show the team here is if I open Outlook, just so you know that I'm not lying. I don't have an email for myself just yet. I'm going to have an email soon as it comes in. And what we can do in terms of observability, this is the really nice part, is you can go into your flow, your trigger flow. I just got the email and I just saw that on my phone. But if I refresh here, yep, RFQ, right? It came in from me at protonmail.com. This is exactly what I need. You could actually see the run of the flow, kind of like in Power Automate, where the flow is triggered. And it was triggered 8 seconds ago. It ran for 3 seconds, and it called the agent within 3 seconds. Very simple, folks. I'm not even going to enter it. But then the next thing you can see is activity for an agent. And in activity for an agent, you could actually see where your agents are being executed last. Now I've been getting emails while we were on the phone, and because I gave it instructions not to do anything with them, it hasn't done anything. This was my test right before today, just to make sure everything is still working. But this is our run, 1249. And I'm going to access this run. And this is cool because for observability's sake, you can retrace the individual steps of an agent, see the inputs and the outputs. I'm a big inputs outputs guy. And we have our trigger. It got our email content. It used the knowledge source. And it actually used, in JSON output, it used the CSV file to determine that the price is this and there's this certain quantity. And by the way, it determined that the Mercedes wheel rim is not available. There's only an Alpine wheel rim. And then I went ahead and sent an email. So I'm going to look at my mailbox, and I got an email from Mac at Concurrency. And as you can see, the instructions were pretty clear. It was use nice HTML formatting. Thank you for the quote, very professional. The Mercedes wheel rim is not available. The only wheel rim is listed is Alpine, not Mercedes. Kind of the same exact response that we were talking about. We have one quantity of this, one quantity of that with a total. The sum total is 43 grand. Thank you for the request. Guys, I didn't take us long to build this, and when I was building this the first time, it didn't take me long either. But I have a pretty rudimentary approach for sales processing, and if for the more complex approaches, obviously it's a little bit more work, and you might have different implementations, but it's done. It's done, and it's using the data. I was amazed at how great that was. So huge kudos to the Copilot team. But that's basically the end of our presentation here. I do have just a few more slides. Now that we've built, the next slide, I did say that we're going to have a second shameless plug. So again, if you wanted to talk more use cases and talk a little bit more about how we can solve these problems and the more enterprisey approaches, here you are. There's a chance. And then with that, without further ado, we have a discussion. Don't just hide. Don't just go away unless you have to. But if you want to stay back and chat, I'm here for it. And anything that I missed, any thoughts, questions, comments, if you wanted to start the conversation?
Yeah, awesome demo. Thank you so much. One of the things you've touched on is that right out of the gate, you have like better than an MVP. I'm curious, maybe others on the call, like who's doing this already? What's the maturity level? Anyone want to throw something in chat? We've seen so many really interesting use cases coming through. Maybe I'll throw one or two of those at you, Mac, while we're waiting for people to warm up. But one of the ones that I think is really neat is an internal use case again. We had an A/B group in customer service, those with and without copilots. And our customer service folks with copilots are 12% faster on average. And that's across 11,500 folks in that customer service area. So it's another really cool one, just kind of watching agents handle entire cases.
Yes. And so that's the customer service approach. There is the SRE. So again, more pro code perspective, there's the SRE agent. I've literally seen it revert bad builds after a deployment. So if something was bad and it needed to swap the deployments, it went right back to the previous build that worked. I use Copilot or GitHub Copilot every day. Matter of fact, I've done webinars on GitHub Copilot, and I can tell you the ROI on GitHub Copilot for developers when they're using it right, because if they're only using it for completions, it's really not the whole shebang. Huge, and it saves even if think about it, even if it saves you a half an hour every day. That's a lot of time in the perspective of a year, and that's a lot of time for both you, for your team, for your company, and your clients. It's huge. Abraham had one thing: would these agents be able to differentiate between spam versus normal emails, and how does the flow look like? So yes, they can, and I think we've seen an example of that even just today, where I gave it the instructions to look in the body and the subject to look for contextually clues that make this a quote. So that's already kind of filters the output there, where it's not going to bother with the email I got from my coworker double checking that I responded to an email, literally what you guys saw in the inbox, because that was there, and then it didn't process. But then as far as spam goes, I think with some intentional instructions, like let's say somebody's spamming you to try and give you fake quotes, we can certainly work that in and say, with some more specific prompt engineering, have some more detection. I think really what you might have in a full-fledged implementation is an agent dedicated to just that. That's detecting spam, and based on certain criteria, it's doing that. Really, bot handling. I have, my brother is a data engineer for a huge travel third-party company, and they handle bots for behavior and activity on their website. You can totally detect that. It's very difficult, but not impossible. So I think that'd be more of a bit of a pro code approach, just because you might want to use some more interesting approaches. But AI, definitely at a POC stage, could totally at least solve the 90th percentile of those, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's going to learn from the context around your organization as well. I think is something to consider. Yes, we can give it very specific things like it, but we can also ask it to use those context clues. So that's awesome.
Yeah, especially given that the flow is triggered on basically what's a flow. If you really wanted to have like that more deterministic style rather than just AI, your flow could say, what's our DNB list, and add that DNB list, do not do business with list, and ultimately filter out those emails. But then more instructions that are more agentic could be targeted at a little bit more specific use cases. Great question, though, Abraham. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments, tears, fears, or maybe experiences that you've had? Feel free to chime in. I know we're over. Few people have already left us, but that's okay. All right, guys. Well, it seems like that's it. If you need anything, again, we have those sessions, but also you saw my QR code for LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. Feel free to talk. Feel free to chat. If you want my email, I'm also happy to give that out. Always happy to talk and talk shop with anybody. But again, just thank you. First of all, to Anne, thank you for being here, and thank you for talking with us. But then to you, the audience as well, thank you for attending, taking the time out of your day to listen to me speak.
Thank you, Mac.
Thank you.